Jalin Hyatt wins the Biletnikoff Award that's given out annually to the nation's #1 receiver. Why this was a no-brainer, what's this mean for the program, and plenty more right here on your Friday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, welcome into your Friday edition of Locked On Vols. Really do appreciate it. Checking in here with Locked On Vols. It is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network that's your team every single day. I'm your host, Eric Kane. As always, find me on Twitter at _Kaner and at Locked On Vols. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like this video. Trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by Christmas. Got a little work to do, but I know if we put our minds to it, we can make that happen. 6K by 12/25. All right, so Jalin Hyatt wins the Biletnikoff Award. We're going to get into that, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered this season. More props and odds and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. This was a no-brainer, in my opinion. We spoke a lot on it in segment number 1 of yesterday's show on why Jalin Hyatt should win this award. On Thursday evening, it became a reality. Jalin Hyatt is the first ever Tennessee Volunteer to win the Biletnikoff Award. And again, there's some pretty wacky lists in terms of who all has won the Biletnikoff Award before. It's kind of wild whenever you think about it. I went through some of those names yesterday on who won it. We'll go through it again today. You've got guys like Randy Moss, guys like Antonio Bryant, Larry Fitzgerald, Calvin Johnson, Michael Crabtree, Golden Tate, Justin Blackman, Marquise Lee, Brandon Cooks, Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Jordan Addison. I mean, we all know who these guys are, right? And for Jalin Hyatt's name to be alongside those names, some of those Hall of Fame names, it's pretty incredible. It's not a very old award. It's the first time it was given out. Was back in 1994. So again, it's a relatively new award, not even 20 years old. Just kidding, not even 30 years old. Let's do math here, Eric. But still, what an accomplishment, right, for Jalin Hyatt. Just a historic campaign where he was tied for the nation lead with 15 touchdowns. He was 4th in the country with 1,267 receiving yards. He was 4th in the country with 105.6 yards per game. And he did all that with only 67 receptions. Again, those stats are far superior to those of who he was going up against to win this award, and both fine players in Marvin Harrison Jr. of Ohio State and Xavier Hutchinson of Iowa State. Again, Harrison Jr. stats, 72 receptions, so not many more compared to what Jalin Hyatt had, only 5 more, but he had 1,157 yards receiving. That was 8th in the country, but 110 less, or 90 less than what a Hyatt had. Just kidding, 110 less. Math is hard for me today. 110 yards less than what Jalin Hyatt did on the season. He had 12 touchdowns. That was tied for 4th in the country, and 96.4 yards per game receiving. That was 9th in the country. Again, all these are great stats here. Again, and it's not like Hyatt is far superior than Marvin Harrison Jr., but it is what it is. He has 3 more touchdowns. He's got more receiving yards. He did it in less receptions. And then Xavier Hutchinson, who came, it was kind of in the third grouping of this bunch, 107 receptions, which was fantastic. 1,171 yards, 6 touchdowns is all he had on the season, but he averaged 97.6 yards per game. So all 3 of those guys deserving, but I mean, when you look at the stat line for the stat-based award, this goes to Jalin Hyatt. Again, you can construe and you can, look and try to mold each award after whatever and what it exemplifies, the player, the person off the field, in the classroom, in the community, all that type of stuff. But again, to my understanding, and we went through the mission statement of the Biletnikoff Award yesterday, it is a stat-based award. And so this was just kind of a no-brainer. I went back and kind of looked at the College Football Awards preview at ESPN.com before I came on and did this. And, they went through and they listed the finalists for each of these prestigious awards, who should win and then who will win. They were spot on with a couple of these. Interesting enough, if you go to the Maxwell Award, it says, the finalists, of course, is Ohio State's C.J. Stroud, USC's Caleb Williams, and Hendon Hooker of Tennessee. And this is given to the College Player of the Year. That award will come out later on. But they said who should win. They actually say Hendon Hooker in the same article. I'm about to reference in Hyatt in a moment. They say Hendon Hooker maybe isn't make good because he was left out of the Heisman Trophy finalist category, but they say who will win. It'll be Caleb Williams of USC. But nonetheless, you go to the Biletnikoff, and of course, this is all not even a thing now since the award came out and it went to Hyatt last night. But you have the finalists of Marvin Harrison Jr. of Ohio State, Xavier Hutchinson of Iowa State, and Jalin Hyatt of Tennessee. They say who should win? Harrison. With a number of Ohio State key skill players injured on the season, hello Cedric Tillman, who missed half the year for Tennessee. Hello Hendon Hooker, who missed the last game and a half for Tennessee, or game and a quarter. Harrison blossomed into the most affordable pass catcher in the country this season. His 1,157 receiving yards were second most in the Big Ten. Well, Jalin Hyatt led the entire SEC. His 12 receiving touchdowns tied for the Big Ten lead. Well, Jalin Hyatt's led for the SEC and the nation. And he was a Pro Football Focus highest grade receiver in the nation. That's quite an accomplishment. For the season, Harrison had just 2 drops, which is really impressive. If you remember, Jalin Hyatt had 2 drops against Missouri, I believe. He reeled in 56% of his contested catches. I don't know where you find that. Maybe that's a Pro Football Focus. I don't know what Hyatt's is, but that's really good. That's the second best rate in the nation. They say who should win is Harrison Jr. Who will win is Harrison Jr. Again, I don't get that. I quite frankly, I don't quite understand that. But it doesn't matter anymore because Jalin Hyatt won the award last night, becoming the first Tennessee Volunteer to ever win the Biletnikoff Award. And remember, I know this is not a very old award, but think of all the good receivers Tennessee had in the 90s. Think of the tight ends. Again, this could go to anyone who catches the forward pass. So it could go to a running back. It could go to a tight end like Jason Witten. Tennessee's never, or the winner has never not been a receiver. So this is kind of a receiver award. But think of all the good receivers Tennessee's had really since the 1994 and on. Robert Meacham comes to mind, a really, really talented wide receiver. Some of those star-studded lineups in the 90s had some great receivers. So what an accomplishment for Jalin Hyatt. So good for him. It's good for the program. It's good for Kelsey Pope. It's good for Alex Golesh. And, of course, it is good for Josh Heupel, the head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers. So Jalin Hyatt, he reels in a national award. Let's see if Hendon Hooker can reel in the Maxwell and some of these others that Tennessee is in consideration for. That'll be known probably by the end of the weekend. Hey, when we come back, we've got plenty more to get in discussion with. There are some volunteers that have appeared on Mel Kiper Jr.'s updated big board and position rankings. We'll get into that here in just one moment. But plenty of NFL games going on. There were some last night. Of course, there'll be some all weekend long Sunday. You've got Army-Navy, some rivalry games that's coming up. And you can get all the latest odds and information and analysis over at BetOnline for those football games. It's my place to go to if I want to lay a wager and I want to go ahead and have some fun and try to get some coin in my pocket for this holiday season. And that's where I encourage you to go as well. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Football, basketball, soccer, esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. They've got podcasts as well. Always the fastest, always the easiest way to get in your sports betting fix. You can head on over to the website, or you can catch it from your mobile device as well to learn about all the latest trends and all those actions. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. Welcome back into your Friday edition of Locked On Vols. It is your team every single day, and I am your host, Eric Kane. Really appreciate you guys for coming back each and every day. Really, really, I do. Let's get into some some future NFL Vols. Tennessee Vols in the NFL projections. Now, Mel Kiper Jr., Todd McShay, Jordan Reed, all those guys. I think that another one there at ESPN is called Todd Miller. I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with him. But nonetheless, they come out with different rankings and big boards and top 25 prospect lists and all that type of stuff all throughout the year. And it really gets more frequent the more you venture on towards the springtime. You get, of course, the NFL Combine. You get Senior Bowl. You get the Shrine Bowl, you get Pro Day, so there'll be a little bit more, but essentially the latest one done by Mel Kiper Jr. actually came out yesterday morning, and plenty of Vols are all over it. So what he did was he put an updated top 25 ranking overall prospects, and then he went into the top 10 at each position, and a couple of Tennessee Volunteers made that top 10 cut, but a lot of them, or a couple more rather, made the just miss, so which would be like 11, 12, 13, something like that. There were no Tennessee Vols that appeared in the top 25, but gosh, guys, I'll tell you, there's some guys in Mel Kiper's top 25 that just will make you lose your mind. Number 1, Jalen Carter, defensive tackle at Georgia. That's understandable. Number 2, Will Anderson. That's understandable. Number 3 is not understandable whatsoever. It's football Jesus Will Levis. It's Will Levis, who I think has an incredible pro makeup. But again, I think what you do on the football field has to count for something. And there's nothing I've ever seen from him that is deserving of a first-round pick, much less a top 5 pick. But here you are, Will Levis, number 3, and he gets 6'3", 235. He makes good throws. He's the body type of what an NFL is looking for. I get it, but again, what you do on the field has got to matter for something, in my opinion, which is not worth much. Bryce Young's at 4. Jackson Smith, whatever his name is, over at the wide receiver at Ohio State, that unfortunately has missed most of the season, and that's a big reason why Marvin Harrison Jr. Blossomed the way he did. He's sitting out the bowl game he's sitting out the playoffs to try to get healthy and to try and be a top 5 pick. He's at number 5. You go on C.J. Stroud's at 7. Bijan Robinson, the running back at Texas, at 8. You keep scrolling down here. Some notable names. Jordan Addison, wide receiver of USC, formerly of Pitt, at 15. Last year's Biletnikoff Award winner. You've got Anthony Richardson of Florida. He's at number 19 in terms of his Mel Kiper Jr.'s top 25 prospects. Anthony Richardson is at number 19. Whew. Again, I get the measurables. I understand. I think he's very raw. I think that so much more good football is in front of him. My goodness, guys, if we're talking first-round pick, I just think what we've seen on the field's got to count for something. Those are Broderick Jones, offensive tackle from Georgia, is at 23rd. Keely Ringo, cornerback of Georgia, is at 25th. Those are some of the notable ones that Tennessee fans might know in the top 25 overall prospect rankings. But now let's start talking some Vols. Again, Mel Kiper, this is his last updated top 25 rankings and position rankings. He's got the top 10 prospects listed at each position. And Hendon Hooker comes in at number 6 at the quarterback position. Now, as I just mentioned, a couple of these quarterbacks, 4 of these quarterbacks were already in his top 25 prospect list. Will Levis, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson. The quarterback that comes in front of Hendon Hooker on this list is Jaden Daniels of LSU. I like his makeup, but again, I don't think I would agree much with that. Hendon Hooker was 4-0 against the quarterbacks in front of him on this list. Of course, didn't play C.J. Stroud at Ohio State. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4-0. I'll tell you what, math is just not my friend today. But Hendon Hooker comes in at number 6. Again, Hendon had a great college last season, last 2 seasons. He's got some metrics and everything that projects to the next level. But just in terms of, just looking at the size, the stature, the measurables, and all that, I mean, I understand why Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis would come in front of Hendon Hooker potentially. Bryce Young is Bryce Young. But again, Hendon Hooker, arguably the best player in the country this year. So I think he should at least be in front of Jaden Daniels. But Hendon Hooker comes in at number 6 on this list. Running backs, of course, Tennessee's bringing back at this point in time all their running backs. So nobody there. Nobody on the fullback H-back list. Nobody on the tight end list. Prince Fant didn't come in on that list. Wide receivers. Remember, these are draft-eligible players. Jalin Hyatt has not declared for the draft, but he's on this list. Cedric Tillman has officially not declared for the draft, but he's on this list. These are draft-eligible players. Tennessee has 2 receivers in the top 10, according to Mel Kiper at the position. That would be Jalin Hyatt at number 6 and Cedric Tillman at number 8. Just because Cedric Tillman's season was very frustrating and he missed half of it with this high ankle injury, he still did some things. Pittsburgh had the game-winning catch on had to fight for inside leverage, come back and get that. He was targeted 18 times in that game. He had 2 touchdowns on 82 yards receiving against South Carolina. His 2021 season was his breakout year, obviously, so he's still going to be a top wide receiver in this draft. With Jalin Hyatt coming in there at number 6, that's impressive. Again, just what a season for Jalin Hyatt. The first couple of receivers, of course, the Ohio State guy, Jackson Smith, comes in up there. Quentin Johnson of TCU's at 2. Jordan Addison's at 3. Zay Flowers of Boston College is 4. Josh Downs of North Carolina is 5. There comes Hyatt. Charlie Jones of Purdue comes in right in front of Cedric Tillman at number 7, and then a couple more out there. So Tennessee's got 2 at the wide receiver position. And then we're getting into the conversation of just missing the cuts. Tennessee offensive tackle Darnell Wright just missing the cut. He's the first name mentioned outside of the top 10 for Mel Kiper Jr. Jerome Carvin is a name. He's the 3rd name that is mentioned, just missing the cuts at the guard position. And then at defensive or at linebacker, you have Jeremy Banks. He's the first inside linebacker mentioned outside of the top 10. And then at outside linebacker is where you have Byron Young. He is the 2nd name mentioned outside of the top 10. And keep in mind, Byron Young's that edge position to where you can put him down in a 4-3 3-point stance. You can stand him up on the edge as a 3-4 outside linebacker. He is characterized in terms of draft purposes as an outside linebacker. That's a group filled with tons and tons of great talent, like Will Anderson Jr. leading the top. Let's see, names you guys would know. B.J. Ojulari's 7th on this list. Nolan Smith is at 4 on this list. Really, really good talent. It's always such a rich talent. It's an important position, and it's a position that gets paid in the NFL. So Byron Young comes in just missing that cut. So 6 players altogether. You've got Hendon Hooker at number 6 in the quarterback top 10, according to Mel Kiper. You got Jalin Hyatt and Cedric Tillman coming in at 6th and 8th in the top 10 wide receiver prospects. You've got Darnell Wright, which would technically be number 11 in this ranking at offensive tackle. Jerome Carvin, which will be number 13 technically in this ranking. Jeremy Banks would be number 11 inside linebackers, and Byron Young would be number 12 outside linebackers. So pretty good representation. Regardless, Tennessee is going to be well represented at this year's NFL draft. These players will likely get drafted, and they have a chance to improve their stocks at the Reese's Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine Bowl game. But again, we'll have to see exactly who plays where. Darnell Wright has a decision to make, though on this day, I would probably lean to him going to the NFL because, again, it's just a lot of money to turn down. Jalin Hyatt's got to make a decision, which I'm sure, in my opinion, he will go to the NFL because I think he's going to be a pretty high draft pick. Not like top 25, but he might. I mean, I've seen some mocks projecting him late first round. I don't think that'll happen, but I think he'll be a higher draft pick. And then, of course, Cedric Tillman's all but gone. I mean, he's got that COVID year of eligibility left. He's already played 5 years. Yeah, I think he's already played 5 years. So, I mean, and with the injuries that he suffered this year. So, anyway, I thought that was interesting. Wanted to bring that on the podcast. That was Mel Kiper Jr.'s top prospects, the latest edition, where he gave the top 25 prospects and then the top 10 at each position. What about Tennessee position groups in 2022? Which ones were the best? We'll discuss right here when Locked On Balls returns. All right, guys and gals, a final segment left here of this Friday edition of Locked On Vols. Got to be honest with you, forgot that all those awards were given out at the same time. I mean, covering a Tennessee team that's not really been in this conversation ever, so I didn't know if it was one here, but nonetheless, that was last night. Let's end this week by going over some position power rankings, shall we? I wrote this over at VolQuest.com. I think this was over last weekend. Maybe it was earlier this week, but nonetheless, I ranked all the position groups from top to bottom. And I'd love for you guys to dispute this. Tell me if you agree, if you disagree, whatever. But here's how I did kind of my rankings. I'll tease the story if you want to go back and read it. Defensive backs come in at number 9. Obviously, it was Tennessee's worst group. Saw some individual growth in some of these players, but overall, just not athletic enough, not quick enough in the back end. Now, you did have, you were missing pieces at points in time. Warren Burrell, a starting cornerback that everybody hated when he was playing, but he was out after week 2. Jalen McCullough missed a couple of games. Kamal Haddon, Christian Charles, Brandon Turnage, Danico Slaughter, all those guys who have made starts throughout the season missed, some time or considerable time. So it was very much musical chairs back there, but man, Tennessee's pass defense giving up 287 yards per game. Going into the Vanderbilt game, it was giving up 302 yards per game, mind you. Brought it down, about 15 yards from that shutout victory. But anyway, it ranked number 13 in the league in pass defense. 5 opponents passed for 300-plus yards against Tennessee. Florida, Alabama, and South Carolina all surpassed the 400-yard marker through the air. I feel like that's hard to do. So in my position, and I remember it's all tight end, defensive line, getting consistent pressure to help out those guys on the back end. That was needed, and a lot of times it wasn't there. But nonetheless, defensive backs come in at number 9. Number 8, I'm going to do the kickers. This includes place kicking and punting. It's kind of a tale of two different positions, obviously. But because, McGrath was pretty solid in his last year in Knoxville. I mean, he had SEC honors twice on the year, booted the game-winning 40-yard knuckleball to beat Alabama. He was 15-19 officially, kicking field goals along of 51 yards. He was 10 of 11 from distances 39 yards or in. He was 5 of 8 of 40-plus range. He did miss 2 extra points, but overall, pretty solid year. But I'm grouping these together, and when you have a very successful offensive year, all those positions are going to come in, so it kind of bumps these down. But something just felt awful about the punt operation, this year. They had one block. They had a couple near blocks. Paxton Brooks, he just did not look great this year. A career low 39 yards per punt on 30 attempts. He only logged 2 punts at 50-plus yards. He had 13 and 11, each of the past 2 seasons. Opponent fair catches were considerably down from you had 18 in 2021 and just to 10 here in 2022. His long of 54 yards on the season was 10 yards shorter than that of last fall, where he had a career low altogether of by 5 yards. So Paxton Brooks, I don't know if there's an injury there. I don't know if it was all scheme, but especially punting just did not look great there. So the kickers coming at number 8. At number 7, I'm going to go the LBs, which I think this group improved a lot this year. From a production standpoint, Jeremy Banks, the numbers dropped. Of course, he did miss one game, the last game of the season. But overall, Juwan Mitchell improved. Aaron Beasley improved considerably. Solon Page played 10 to 20 snaps a game and gave Tennessee some good options there off the bench. I think that the group had a better mentality. I think that they attacked downfield a little bit better. They didn't run under blocks. They went over the top of blocks. They kept inside leverage. They set the edge when needed. They filled gaps. They were there for cutbacks. Were they perfect? No. Were they a good pass dropping team in zone coverage? No. But I think the linebackers did improve. But again, you've got all these offensive positions. It kind of bumps these down a little bit. So linebackers come in at number 7. Number 6, I'll go the defensive line. Trademark for Rodney Gardner is you're going to play a whole lot of guys, and that's pretty much what Tennessee did. Tennessee was second in the league in stopping the run at 111.8 yards per game. Held teams under the century mark 4 times on the year. Held Alabama to 114 yards, which is really good. Kentucky to 107 yards. LSU just to 55 yards. Again, it's not just the defensive line in that category, because the linebackers and the safeties, the corner, it's all about fits, but it all starts up front. And so I think that defensive line should get a whole lot of credit. But again, creating consistent pass rush with the front 4, that was not the case this year. You did see them mix up some things and get some more people involved, especially some young guys like Joshua Josephs, Tyree West. You had veterans that flashed at times like Byron Young and Tyler Barron, but you saw some consistency throughout from Amari Thomas and Latrell Bumpus. Pretty solid defensive line group. They'll come in at number 6. Number 5, we're getting into the all the offensive position now. So you have the number 1 offense in the country. Number 5 is going to be the running backs. Maybe people will dispute this, but I'm going to have number 5 of the running backs. It seems a little low because they were super, super efficient. Only school in the country to average 300 yards passing and 200 yards rushing a game. Led the nation in touchdowns as a group with 39, which was really good. Of course, you had a mixture of 3 running backs. You had a hybrid tight end in Princeton Fant that was there as well. Jalen Wright led the team with 786 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. Jabari Small scored 12 touchdowns on the season on the ground. He had 696 yards rushing. Princeton Fant, 5 touchdowns on 6 carries. Dylan Sampson, 6 touchdowns, 400 yards rushing, 58 attempts. Again, this was a really good group. It was, and it was a big question mark coming into the season because of depth purposes and depth issues. But Tennessee was able to hold on, of course, with Jabari Small always having the fear of hurting his shoulder and having to go out and all that type of stuff. But I think the running backs had a really good year. Were they perfect? No. Did they struggle in pass protection early on? Sure. But I thought the running backs had a pretty solid year. Number 4 is going to be the tight ends. You guys have heard me beat this drum so many times. How important is the tight end position in this offense? It is so important. I'll say it one more time because of the pace of play. When you stop to sub, that allows the defense to sub. So having a tight end on the field that can split out wide, can play the slot, can play in a bunch, can play on the line, can play as an H-back, can play in a bunch formation, can play in the backfield, it is so critically important. And both Jacob Warren and Princeton Fan could do all of those things. So it was so important. And for Tennessee to flow the way it did offensively, it's because you had all this cooperation from the tight end. So the tight end's coming in number 4. Number 3 is the offensive line. You can always make the case the offensive line should be number 1. Okay, it was a Joe Moore semifinalist, Joe Moore Award semifinalist on the season. It was the offensive line that blocked for the number 1 scoring offense, the number 1 total offense in the country. Big reason Cooper Mays stayed healthy this year. Darnell Wright was a 2-time first-team all-conference player, 3-time SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. He will be an All-American. Jerome Carvin, his leadership, his stability at left guard, and the left tackle as well. That was the question coming into the season, but by the end of the year, it was a 2-man job, and Gerald Crawford and Gerald Mincy and J.J. Crawford. But I think both of those guys held up for the most part. This offensive line, again, could be number 1, but we're going to have it number 3. Wide receivers, number 2, Jalin Hyatt. We talked about him enough. The threat of having Cedric Tillman on the team, what Brew McCoy was able to continuously give you as the year went on. Or Mel Keaton stepping up and the way he did to fill in the shoes of Cedric Tillman. Squirrel White came in and did some things. Tennessee was explosive on the outside. You had 2 number 1 receivers essentially, and Cedric Tillman and Jalin Hyatt went on the field together. Wide receivers number 2, and then of course number 1's the quarterbacks, or the quarterback and Hendon Hooker. Phenomenal. Should have been a Heisman finalist. 100% should have been a Heisman finalist. He was just incredible. Tennessee's best player was at the most important position in all of sports, and that was the quarterback position. So again, my rankings, you can find them. You can find all of it plus some more write-up and analysis over at VolQuest.com. Number 9, defensive backs. Number 8, the kickers. Number 7, linebackers. Number 6, defensive line. Number 5, running backs. 4 tight ends. 3, offensive line. 2 wide receivers. And number 1, the quarterback room. Let me know what you think. If you agree, if you disagree, fill out those comment sections. Find me on Twitter at _Caner and at LockedOnVols. Appreciate all the comments, guys. I had somebody drop in my comments yesterday and say that they drive a truck and they're all over the world, but listening to Locked On Vols helps them feel like they're closer to home. Man, that's awesome. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Really, really do appreciate it. We got plenty more to talk about over the weekend. We'll continue to see what's going on with Tennessee basketball and a whole lot more. And we'll be back at it on a Monday right here on Locked On Vols. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen and watch. Biggest stories of the day, takes of the day, sports game recaps, all that and more. That is Locked On Sports Today. Appreciate you guys as always. Thank you so much. Same time, same place. We will do it again on Monday. This is Locked On Vols.